Okay, welcome to Voice of San Diego at home. It is May 4th, 2020. May the 4th be with you. This is Voice of San Diego. I'm Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and editor-in-chief at Voice of San Diego. I'm here in my kitchen, like always, as we enter yet another week of this shutdown and weird existence that we're a part of. We have a great show today planned. We're going to go through some of the news. I also have a special guest. Executive Coach Tali Thomas is going to come in and talk about what she's been hearing and maybe give some pearls of wisdom out there so that you can get through this with me with great spirits and success. Let's get right into the news. This weekend, of course, was Cops at the Beach weekend. It was an extraordinary scene at the beach this weekend. This was my shot of the police in Ocean Beach. There was an extraordinary presence. They were trying to keep people moving. I asked every single one I saw all the way from Dog Beach. We rode our bikes down the cliffs, and every single nook of the cliffs, there was somebody, there was a police officer there barking instructions down saying, hey, you can swim, but don't just stand in the water, dude. You can't just stand in the water. You can't just stand there. You got to walk. Incredible police presence. The mayor was clearly not interested in people hanging out on the beach or creating any kind of scene like what happened in Orange County. The presence was something else. I think my observation from this whole weekend was that the real problem was actually the streets. I drove through PB and also Newport Avenue and Ocean Beach. The people crammed onto the streets in these places on Garnett or on Mission Boulevard or Newport Avenue, waiting for food. That's where the crowding occurred. The beach seemed like it was handling it pretty well. I also have an update about this glorious restaurant, Chinamax. I went to Chinamax all the time. Remember lunches? Do you guys remember going to lunch with people? what that was like? Deciding where to go and such. Well, if somebody didn't know where to go and they wanted to go somewhere that I wanted to go and they wanted something central, I always said Chinamax. I want to go to Chinamax. Dim sum for lunch was incredible. My friend Rich Toscano had introduced me to Chinamax, and I asked him recently what why he liked it so much. He said, it tastes really good. And I said, come on, man, what else do you got? And he said, well, I felt euphoria all day after I ate it, which was a pretty good endorsement. But that's how I felt too. Chinamax had an incredible year. Obviously, it started right away. Chinese New Year, they make tons of money, usually lots of profit for the year. They had 20 or 30 parties that were canceled as the coronavirus started spreading in China. And then, as it started spreading worldwide, they went through everything restaurants are going through. And then it was a horrible, you ever look at Twitter at like 9 p.m. and you're scrolling, it's like a doom scroll. You're just like learning all these things, especially at the first week of April. And I'm doing that April 6th. I'm scrolling through all these horrors. The president says this, or this many people lost their jobs. All these things are coming up. And then I see fire, restaurant, Kearny Mesa, and I recognize it immediately. My favorite place, Chinamax. I called the owner. I called the fire department. I wanted to follow up because the second worst part, after you watched it burn live, was the insinuation by many on social media that it was somehow deliberately set, maybe for the insurance because everything was so bad, or because of a hate crime of some kind. I followed up with the fire department, and they said no, there was no reason at all to believe that it was arson. It was started in the sort of second floor of the building, so right here in the soffit, and not necessarily in the restaurant itself, which was a relief. But I just wanted to update that. A lot of people saw the burn, but maybe we're wondering what happened. I talked to the owner, Cindy Wu. She'd gone through so much, moved from Hong Kong, went to New York, moved to San Diego, built this from scratch in 2003, which happens to be the year I moved to San Diego. And I followed up. I followed up with the fire department, And they said, absolutely, there's no reason at all to suspect arson. In fact, it started outside the restaurant, and they don't suspect it. There's also security view surveillance camera footage of the incident, how it started. I talked to Cindy Wu for quite some time about her experience, what made the food so good, and whether she's coming back. And she said she's not sure. She's not sure. There's no GoFundMe or anything right now you could support. But I just wanted to follow up on that. I love that place so much. And just an example of a real horrific year for those folks. So I wanted to follow up on that. Okay, another point. We are all wondering when we're going to reopen. We did a story last week about the criteria. Now, this is criteria that the president put down. You hear a lot from the president about reopen, time to liberate. His own administration put down 5 elements of criteria about what it's going to take to reopen states and local government. Here are the 5 criteria, and we have hit in San Diego County 4 of them right now. A downward trajectory of positive COVID-19 cases, a downward trajectory of people sick with flu-like symptoms, a downward trajectory of people sick with COVID-like symptoms, and hospitals operating normally with plenty of capacity. We have all those things going together. In fact, hospitals are as slow as it gets. They're losing, nurses are losing hours, physician assistants are losing hours, doctors are losing hours, if not being outright furloughed or laid off. It's Palomar Health losing $800,000 a day from its operations. The only one that we're missing is this guy right here, a robust coronavirus testing program. The idea being that, testing is the way we see where the virus is. Wouldn't it be great if we could fly over San Diego, put on special glasses, and identify where the virus is? We would know where it is. Well, testing is our version of doing that. Right now in South Bay, they are experiencing tremendous still positive rates of infection, at least according to their tests. So in some areas of South Bay, there are 17, 20, 30% positive tests. If you have a 17% positive test ratio in some of these areas, you're going to see that means there's a lot more people out there who are infected. You've got to get that rate down so that you can get to a point where you say, hey, we know where the virus is. We know where it's not. So this came from Chris Van Gorder, the CEO of Scripps, and Daniel Gross, the executive consultant of Sharp. Scripps and Sharp are rivals, major rivals. Their rivalry and difficulty working together is notorious in the region. They put out a joint letter to the federal government saying there's a misperception that San Diego and Southern California are flattening the curve, and therefore supplies and attention can go elsewhere. That is not the case. Hospital COVID-19 cases in the southern part of our region continue to rise, and any impression we're flattening our curve ignores the threat south of the border and the fact that providers in the San Diego region do not have adequate supplies to meet the projections we anticipate. So it's an extraordinary moment for the region. We've been hitting all of these basic criteria except for the robust testing, but this South Bay situation is something we're monitoring. Our Maestri Krishnan did a lot of work on that. Here's an example of the Sharp Chula Vista Medical Center. It has a 20% positive rate of coronavirus tests. That's just way high. That indicates there's far more people who have it. County Supervisor Kristen Gaspar also sent a letter saying maybe we should quarantine people as they come across the border. There's still about 42,000 people coming across the border. It seems pretty obvious that we brought the virus in, people on this side of the border, but now it's just ravaging Baja and Tijuana hospitals. So there's a lot of concern. Of course, virus doesn't understand the border and all of that. So really important moment for our community if we're to get out of this. All right. Next up, let's bring in, we're going to talk with a special guest. She is Tali Thomas. She is an executive coach. She is, lost my spot real quick. She's, spent 13 years as an executive coach. helping people sort of understand where they're at in their lives and where they want to be and what's in the way. And I've obviously found a lot of over the years, I've worked with Tali here and there often, and she's provided a lot of perspective, helped me get through some of the weirdest executive decisions I've had to make, and strategies for that. Now, of course, a lot of people across the community are trying to figure out whether to save their businesses or how to even get through life these days, how to find purpose and perspective. And so I wanted to bring her on. Hello, Tali. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hey.
Hello.
Hey, thanks for joining. You've got an actual green screen there, I guess, huh?
Well, as we're talking about all the different changes and things that we're dealing with, I will say that this has always been my home office. And one of the gifts of this is that I have the pleasure of dealing with the adjustment of my husband working from home as well and taking over my office. And one of the things that his company has been doing is just creating some fun in the middle of their Zoom meetings. So they do all kinds of backgrounds. And so he literally put a green screen behind us. So again, one of the changes in all of this.
He sounds like my kind of guy. All right, let's ask everybody out there, if you have a question about how to keep things in perspective, just how to get through life these days, how to, if you have a big business decision, anything like that. I'm not sure we can promise some great clarity, but we can wrestle with some of your issues or just blanket perspectives. I just wanted to, first of all, test whether we could bring a guest on. That seems to work. And then talk to Tali about what's going on. So Tali, you've been talking to so many people out there, business leaders, other organizations. What is it you're hearing most as people go through this?
Well, I will say, and I just want to start by acknowledging that there has been a tremendous amount of people that have been impacted and really have been devastated by all this. So part of this conversation is going to be about what to do and some of the positive things that have come from it. So I just want to be really clear that we're not discounting what's been going on, but this conversation is just about what to do based on the current situation to create some more positive outcomes.
Okay.
So I will say one of the first things is that people are being incredibly creative. People are, pivoting, they're reinventing. We've got a lot more entrepreneurs than we did out there. So there's that. Absolutely. There is fear, lots of fear. We have people operating outside their comfort zone. We have some really brilliant people that are part of our community running companies, and they know they have a lot of the right answers. And for the first time, they don't know. And an additional significant thing that I'm seeing is people are compromising their well-being. They're homeschooling, they're dealing with changes like having their spouses home, speaking of the green screen. So their well-being is really being compromised.
So you mentioned fear. I feel like our most productive conversations over the years have been when I've been particularly afraid of a decision or a dilemma. Now there's just these our reality has been so jarred that there are some real extreme moments of fear. There's if you think of a restaurant owner out there just terrified about whether they'll even be able to pay rent or keep their business, the business that might have been successful, alive. There might be somebody who's very comfortable but is terrified about all the news about when they'll get to see their grandkids again, or when school might be back in session so that they can get back to work and pay the bills. When you talk to somebody who's dealing with just a kind of panicky fear like that, what's the first sort of step in helping them sort of get a different perspective?
Well, it's a great question. And, when you and I were having a conversation, I had shared the idea of staying in the present. And that's when you said, you know what, that might be something that would be valuable for our community. And I would be interested, and of course I will share more, but what was it that you heard that made a difference when we spoke to staying in the present?
I think what I was thinking about at that point was just, you can't control what's going to happen in 3 or 4 months. You can't control what's going to happen next week or something. But this idea of like, well, you can take this specific decision and issue off your plate right now. That might be the best way to go forward. That you have a list of problems, a list of to dos. Just get right after the beginning. I think, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, and just the fact that it made a difference for you, I would invite those of you out there in the community to just really just take a breath and notice where you're in the future. One of the things is that where people really start to get scared is, what is my financial situation going to be like 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now? Am I going to be able to get out of the house 3 months, 6 months, a year from now? So there's a lot of concerns. And what I notice is when I'm working with my clients is that if they can literally just focus on today, this week, what is their health today, this week? What are the circumstances they're dealing with this week? If it's about toilet paper, if it's about, do they have enough meat in the house? Do they have enough food in the house? Do the kids have the supplies they need for this week? Have we figured out what the plan's going to look like between homeschooling? So I think that's such a key piece, is where people start to get scared is when they really start projecting out into the future of what could happen.
So I think that is helpful when you're in that moment, but there is still like a life. A lot of us are counting on the idea of summer camps or if school's starting up again. And there is so much uncertainty about that. We don't even know how to enroll kids in school for next year. There's no link for that. There's nobody's answering the phones at high schools. There's you can't get to the orthodontist right now. You can't, there's just these things that, yes, it's okay to be like, well, I'll just worry about today, but there are long-term concerns that a lot of us are dealing with that, how do you sort of live with them? Just keep going and be like, well, I'm just going to handle today, but I still need some certainty around these concepts and I can't get it. There's nowhere to get it.
Well, what's interesting is, as you listed out those things, is that you said, we don't know, we don't know, we don't know, right? As you're going through that bullet point list. And you're right, we don't know. And because we don't know, we can think about what we're going to do. We can imagine what we're going to do. But when I'm working with my clients, it's the same thing. If they're having, even in the past, when they were having issues with an employee or a team member, it was like, how am I going to handle this? And then out of the blue, something that we could not have planned for happens. And I'm always blown away when I'm working with my clients about that. And so you're right, we don't know about the schools and we don't know about the orthodontist. And so what we can do is even just make a list, like, here are all the things that are unknown. Get them out of our head, where we are really great at making stuff up. And again, I don't mean to be, it's not that I don't want to be respectful of people's thoughts and feelings. Of course, we're having them. But again, just to take out a piece of paper and make a list of all the things we don't know about will create a sense of calm, because we don't know. And there's nothing we can do when we don't know. But what happens is we want to know. And typically we have a lot of the answers. And so that's where it gets uncomfortable, because it's not familiar.
And it feels weak, right? It feels weak to not be able to fix something that makes you uncomfortable. It feels like you're failing, right? And I think a lot of people are struggling with like that sort of, I don't have an answer for this. So how do I, is that something wrong with me?
Right. Because we want to fix things, right? When there's something that's not going well or we're afraid of it, we want to fix it. We want to have an answer. And And so there's something we make it mean about ourselves when we can't provide that answer for ourselves, for our family, for the people we work with. So yeah, I mean, you reached out like you said the word weak. Yeah, absolutely. It can feel that way because so much of our value is tied in to fixing things and making things better. And we're just in a place of not knowing.
One of the things that's happening in this community, we're watching a lot of executives in the government sphere make big decisions, and they're struggling with risk. How do you deal with the fact that you might make a decision that opens the virus up to spreading more, then somebody will blame you for making that decision, and you have to live with that. We can't live and operate out of fear. We can't make decisions out of fear, but sometimes those fears are big, and so if you were talking to like Governor Gavin Newsom and he's like, man, I can't be responsible for 1,000 people dying if I open things up too fast, or I can't let this beach be open because these people will think that I wasn't serious about my orders that they not congregate, and I'm just dealing with this like fear about where things are headed, and I can't control. But I think it's wrong to also just you should make a decision based on other factors, not on just what you're worried might happen if you do this or that. So how do you make a proper decision in a moment like this when there's so many potential wrong paths?
Well, it depends on the level of consequences. So some of our decisions are really small, like, am I just not going to sit down because I've got a full plate today and really homeschool my first grader? Because the reality of it is that teachers have superpowers and they're going to go back to school and they are going to deal with the setback. And then you have something like you just spoke about. And I think what we have to do is take a step, right? Because we're not going to have all the facts before we take the next step. We're going to take the step and then we're going to see what the facts are. And then we're going to make the next step and we're going to see what the facts are that come out of it. But what we don't want is for people to be paralyzed, as you said, about the fear and not do anything, because we have to move forward. And again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how, the virus works in a way that experts might, which is a whole nother conversation, but we have to do something and we have to make the best decision that we can with the information we have. And then we step back and we say, what we try work? What were the consequences? Do we move forward? Do we step back?
Mm-hmm. I did a speaking engagement, if you can call it that, this morning with a large group, and we spent a lot of time talking. And one of the men brought up at the end, he said, he brought up all these points about how you can't go to a restaurant even if everybody's 6 feet apart, because the droplets in the air will be there and we'll get sick. And I tried to make the point that like we're gonna have to live with the threat at some point. It doesn't seem like we'll be able to stamp out the virus completely. It seems like we'll have to understand risk and the threat as part of our life in some form, whether we dial it completely up and just try to act normal, or whether we handle it, in some modified existence. How do you coach people to manage threats like existing, this person might sue you or you might get sick, these things that might happen all the time, but you live with. And sometimes they overtake our consciousness. And other times we can operate with them.
Well, again, so much of it is that's in the unknown. And so many of us wouldn't go into business if we thought about all the fears and all the potential disasters that could happen. We wouldn't have children if we focused on that. So, I know I've said this a few times, but what are the facts? What are we dealing with in this moment? And then, people are going to make their choice. Are they comfortable going to a restaurant? Are they comfortable getting their hair done? Do they have to be 12 feet from somebody else? Can they make a request? Can I be a little bit further? But You're right. I mean, we could literally turn it in, our brains are capable of turning a lot of this into a lifetime television show. You know, I'll sit with and talk to different colleagues and friends and people I work with, and we can make these elaborate stories of what will happen. And that might happen. I can't promise that they won't. But again, going back to the facts, what are the facts right now? What's the next step that I have to take?
One of the things,
and notice where that seems really simple, and our automatic makes us want to make it very complicated. Like, this just all can be very complicated. And my invitation is, can you literally take a piece of paper out and make a list and start there?
Yeah. One of the things that a trick that you've helped me with in the past was this concept of picturing the worst case scenario and then just like grappling with that. It's not so bad, like maybe somebody's going to quit, or somebody's going to buy something that you wanted, or if there's some sort of public fallout that you were worried about that you're thinking might happen. And you picture the worst case scenario and you realize like, oh, I could even deal with that worst case scenario. That's fine. But in some of these cases, the worst case scenario has gotten really horrific. Like, it's gotten to the point of like, oh, I can't actually deal with drowning in my own lungs, or, losing my business or what. So, I mean, does that change that calculus? Do you say, well, maybe you shouldn't picture the worst case scenario at that point then?
Well, no, because I think that you do. I mean, again, when you're concerned about somebody leaving, for example, that was the first thing you said. It's like, okay, what will happen? What will the impact be to your business? And somebody will have an answer that, the whole it won't work. It just, nothing will happen. And that's not necessarily the case. And then it's like, well, and what happens if the company falls apart or your business falls apart? Then what happens? And as we go down, we realize like, so we start again. With something like this, absolutely. We are all susceptible to being devastated by this. And again, what does that mean? Does that mean that we don't connect with the people that we love? Does that mean that we never do something? It is. And in the end, in a lot of different situations, our well-being is at risk. Even when it comes to someone starting a new job, somebody getting fired, all those things we, are so afraid of.
Mm-hmm. Well, we lost you for a brief second, so I'm just going to capture what we had in a bottle. That was great discussion.
Oops, I lost you.
Yeah. Well, you can find, you can't
Sorry,
hear,
Scott,
huh?
I can't hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Can you tell people where to find you? All right, I'm going to let you go. Thank you, Tali. And you can find her at Tali Thomas at Synergy Coaching Group. You can search up Tali Thomas, TaliThomas, and find it Synergy Coaching Group. So thanks for indulging me. A little bit of a different thing than normal. I wanted to bring in somebody who's helping a lot of people think through this. And there she is. Let's just get. Can you hear me now?
I can. And it's so
can you
interesting
just tell people?
I'm sorry. What was that?
Just tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Of course. No. All I was gonna say is like, even just getting dropped off right there. And I know that was on my end. It's just noticing, right? Like, that's part of this new world is that we fall off, and I could have beat myself up and blamed it on the Wi-Fi, or I just hop back on and say, oh, that's the new norm.
Yeah, so we're really good at being vulnerable on this show. Tell people how they can get a hold of you.
Great. So you can go to my website, which is synergycoachinggroup.com. Or you can email me directly at Tali, T like Tom, ALI.Thomas@yahoo.com.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on. I'm sure people enjoyed it, and maybe we can check in as things improve.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again for indulging me on that. I wanted to have real conversations here and there about how to get through this and how we're going to manage this new reality. I found that it's okay to not know what's going to happen here and there, to be afraid some days about how it's going to work out. This morning I woke up wondering how I was going to pull off this speech thing I had to do, and it turned out to be really great. So sometimes you can just control what you can control, and go on from there. A couple of points I wanted to highlight. We do have a news story up today I wanted to bring to your attention. This is a piece by our Mackenzie Elmer. She's been doing some great work on energy issues. So you might remember that the San Diego City and a few other cities formed a new power company. So they are trying to go out and buy electricity from the open market and then turn it into something SDG&E will still deliver here. But these local government entities are the ones out going to buy it. So they got to hire a new CEO. They've basically created a new government agency. You can check that out at voiceofsandiego.org. Mackenzie's doing some great report. You can read my story about what happened to Chinamax, my favorite place to go take people to, and what a story and what a tragedy to see that. And of course, the best way to follow Voice of San Diego is with the morning report every day. It's our most popular product. It's a conversational rundown of all of our news and what's been happening each day and what we think you should care about. We just got this delightful new story posted by Ryan Bradford. He's just a fun writer in San Diego. I asked him to look at what's happening with concert venues. You remember concerts? Remember how fun concerts were? Just letting go and being right next to some sweaty, fun people. And sure would like to do that again. He talked to some people whose job that is to put on, and how they're picturing the future and handling some of these daily fears. So I recommend that. He's just a delightful writer. If you don't get his newsletter, Awkward San Diego, check that out, Ryan Bradford. Also, this is our coronavirus testing tracker. This has gone up significantly, 2134. That's how many tests we're doing on average over a 7-day average. Trying to get that up. This is our capacity in the county, but the real number is 5,200. That's what the governor says we need to cross that last bit of criteria off before we can prove that we have a handle on where the virus is or where it's not. So check out that updated every day, the coronavirus testing tracker. And so that is our show for today. Thank you to Tali Thomas and to everybody who came on board. If you have any questions, we'll be doing a discussion on Wednesday, of course, Voice of San Diego at Home Wednesday, when we take all your questions and go through them one by one. Voice San Diego is a nonprofit, and if you enjoy the investigative and explanatory work that our reporters do every day, please go to VOSD.org/give. I can even pull this up, VOSD.org/give, and you can become a part of that. Last week, we had our first online member event, and it went superbly, went really well. A lot of people had some great questions, and proved that we can have events without actually getting together. So thanks again to Tali Thomas and to all my staff at Voice of San Diego, and we will talk to you on Wednesday.